Well, it's great to see everybody here this afternoon. Welcome to The Current. If this is your first time ever, we are brand new at The Current. This is our fourth week to ever do The Current, so we're just excited to have you with us as we get this thing kicked off and started. If this is your first time, I just want to remind you to fill out a Connect card. You can drop it in the plate at the end of the service, or, and this is probably even better, if this is your first time, when you leave on your way to Connections, stop by our guest table, and we have something for you. We'd love to just get to know you, see if we can help in any way that we can. We'd love that you're here, and we hope that we see you again. We actually like seeing you here. And I hope you like us, because we're just a group of people who do this thing together. We explore faith. We look at what the Bible teaches about all kinds of different things, and we try to figure out what does it mean to follow Jesus together. So that's what we're all about. We hope that you can continue with us. When we're done here today, we're going to be in Connections, which is just a room right outside these doors and to the right, where we'll have food. I think there's pizza on the docket for today. Yes, which is going to be exciting. So if you haven't had your pizza fix in a while, today is the day to stick around for that. We've been in a series called Love God, Love Others, and it's been a lot of fun. This is the last week of our series called Love God, Love Others. If you've missed it, you can go back online, but we've been going through the Gospel of John, and this series has been in John 12 and 13, and we'll continue in it today. But I just want to kind of get started with this question. The question for the morning is, what are Christians known for? Okay, when you think about a Christian, what do you think they're known for? Okay, Duran says Jesus, and by the way, it wasn't a rhetorical question. Some of you are like, should I answer? I don't know the rules. Yes. Being judgmental, yes. How many of you have known a judgmental Christian? Anybody? Yes, you know a judgmental Christian. All the hands go up. What else? What are Christians known for? Hypocrisy, yes. How many of you know a hypocritical Christian? Yeah, we talked about that last week, and we talked about how basically all of us are hypocrites, and that's just kind of the way it is. We try, but we fail from time to time, and so that's the thing. How many of you know something else about Christians? What are Christians known for? Just off the top of your head. Yes? What's that? Loving. That's the first good answer so far, right? So far, like, we're 2/3 bad and 1/3 good. So loving is a great answer. There's so many different things that Christians are known for, and there's so many different things that when you just say the word Christian, people have in their minds, and a lot of this stuff we've earned, right? We've earned the title of judgmental. We've earned the title of hypocrisy, because along the way, we mess up and we fail, and we get known by all of these different things. But the goal really is love, and actually we're going to find that in our passage today. I'll tell you the way I grew up. The way I grew up was I was in a church environment that said Christians are known by what they do and don't do. They're known by what they're against more than what they're for. They're known by what they wear. That was one of the big things. So there was all these rules, all these guidelines, the way I grew up, how you could dress. And this is going to sound really crazy to some of you. It may not sound crazy to all of you, but I don't know. One of the rules that we had in the church that I grew up in was that women weren't allowed. No, hopefully I've got your attention so far, right? You're like, what are women not allowed to do? Women were not allowed to wear pants, okay? That was kind of the thing. And so women had to wear dresses, men had to wear pants, men had to have short hair. Like, my hair is pretty short, but it's getting to the point where it's kind of starting to get too long, and I might need to trim it down to meet the guidelines, okay? You could only read one Bible, and it was the King James Version, and all these different rules that they said, these are going to be the things that when people look at us, they say, they must be Christians, because they're dressing the right way and looking the right way. And so in my family, we broke all the rules when we were at home. My mom and my sister, they wore pants, all over the place. We had a great time just wearing pants and shorts and, whatever we wanted to do. And then as Sunday would come, it's like, all right, get your skirts on, let's go to church. You know what I mean? So we would dress up and do the thing. And there was a woman that had gotten kicked out of the choir because she was caught in public wearing pants. And I know that just seems so scandalous, and I'm sorry for even talking about it in church. I know that might have offended you, but she was seen in public wearing pants, and she can't be in the choir. So New Year's Day, 1990, true story, I'm 5 years old. My mom, my sister, and we want to go to Walmart because we got to get something at Walmart. I don't know what we were doing, but basically we had to go there. And my mom, because she was wearing pants and didn't want to get caught, says, let's go to the Walmart in the next town. Okay, so so this is kind of the way I grew up. It's just the way it is. So we didn't want to be caught at Walmart red-handed with our pants on, okay? So usually it's the other way around. But anyway, so we go to the Walmart in the next town. We lived in Oklahoma City. We went to the Walmart in Edmond. Well, that day, this guy who had, I guess, been strung out all night, drugs, alcohol, whatever, drove his car through the door of Walmart, like through the glass, as we're at the checkout line, has a shotgun, and wants to free the children. I'm not making this up. In fact, I Googled this week just to see if the story is anywhere. But basically, this guy drives through. So here we are in Walmart. We're checking out. All of a sudden, this car comes crashing through, and nobody knows what to do. Everybody says, duck. And so we ducked. And everybody's like, run. And so we ran to the back of the store, and the whole time I'm thinking, I hope no one sees us wearing pants because we're going to get kicked out of church. And later on, the guy's on the news, and he's saying, I came, I wanted to free the children, whatever. And so all I could think of was, oh no, someone's going to see us. We almost died today because we were so afraid, because what we were taught was a Christian is a Christian when they're known by whatever the guideline was, whatever the standard was, whatever the rule was. And the problem with that was, one, Jesus never said that, and two, it was just a man-made rule. It was just a man-made rule that someone came up with in that particular church culture that I was in and said, this is what a Christian does, or this is what a Christian doesn't do. And so, what we're going to find today is that Jesus actually has an entirely different way of describing what a Christian is known for. Now, let me just say, there are all kinds of things that we as Christians, if you're a person of faith, and if you follow Jesus, that we are expected to do. We've talked about this, that there are things that if we get into sin, they can draw us away from this closeness that we have with God. So I'm not saying that what we do doesn't matter, but what I'm saying is what we're known for, like what people know us for, Jesus actually said, this is the thing. And it had nothing to do with wearing pants or skipping town to make sure that nobody saw you in them. And we're going to find out what it is. John 13:31. If you don't have a Bible, you can download it on the YouVersion Bible app. The icon is right there. And if you have a Bible, you can turn John chapter 13, starting in verse 31. This is what Jesus says. John 13, starting in verse 31, when he had gone out, so I just want to kind of give a little context. Last week we talked about Judas. Judas was the guy who was one of the fake disciples. He was one of the 12 people that followed Jesus around everywhere he went, and he wasn't being true. And so when it came time to kind of, get to the point where his true colors came out, he went away to go betray Jesus. And so where we are in the story is Jesus is talking to his 12 disciples minus one. Judas has left. And he has left to go betray Jesus. And we'll get to that in a few weeks when we get to that part of John. So when he had gone out, when Judas left, Jesus said, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him at once. Okay, so there's a lot of glorifieds in that passage. Here's the point. When Jesus is going to be put on the cross, that is actually a way of him being glorified. And we talked about this in the last few weeks. The word glorified is just a way of saying he's made much of. That Jesus' deity, his godness, his beauty is actually going to shine through in this horrific event of the crucifixion. That when he is put on this cross to die for you and for me, that in that moment, it's actually a moment of glorification. The most shameful way to die possible, the most shameful way ever to have been invented in human history would actually be a thing that would glorify God. Why? It would glorify God because it's the moment where God's incredible love for mankind is put on display for all to see. So that's why he says, when the Son of Man, that's the way of Jesus referring to himself, when the Son of Man is glorified, God is going to be glorified in me. And if God is glorified in me, I'm glorified in him, and we're glorified at once. In other words, when you see Jesus on this cross, when you see Jesus put on the most shameful way to die possible, it's a way of God saying, I love you. And in that moment, you see this incredible glorification. So Jesus is setting up his disciples like, hey, listen, I'm about to go to the cross, but it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. You got to understand, these guys were like his friends. These guys were his buddies. So he says, I'm about to go die. And they're going, wait a second. What's going on? And Jesus is reassuring them, you got to know this is a good thing. This is a really, really good thing. So let's keep reading. Little children, verse 33, little children. This is a way that rabbis would often refer to their disciples. This is not a put down, it's just a way of talking in this day. Little children, yet a little while I am with you, Jesus says. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I say also to you, where I am going, you cannot come. So if you think about this, up until this point, Jesus has been saying nothing other than follow me. Okay, these are 12 guys who he went and interrupted their life and said, I know that you're kind of doing all these different things, but you need to stop all of that and just start following me. And these 12 men dropped everything, and they've been walking with Jesus this entire time. And now all of a sudden, Jesus says, okay, now I'm going to go to a place that you can't come with me. I'm going to go die for the sins of mankind, and you can't actually do that with me. Your responsibility is actually something much different. Verse 34. A new commandment, and this is the thrust of everything he says in this passage. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So your responsibility now is to love. Your responsibility now is to do the one thing that you can do and let me do the one thing that only I can do, and that is only I can go to the cross and you have to love. This is your best witness of me. We'll talk more about this in a little bit. So Simon Peter, Peter is the disciple that's a little bit of a loudmouth. He's kind of like, he kind of speaks before he thinks. Do you know anybody like that? Somebody said Ron. So he was the only one who actually remained quiet, the one who spoke before. Anyway, but Simon Peter was a guy who was just very brash, and he would speak up in these situations, and sometimes that was a really good thing. Like sometimes he would save the day, and other times he would just make a mess of everything. And this is one of those times where Jesus says, I'm going to go, your job is to love. Simon Peter jumps in, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, where I'm going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow me afterward. So it's almost like Peter's like, okay, enough with all that love stuff. What did you say about leaving? Like you're going to you said all this stuff about being glorified and God's going to glorify you and himself and all this stuff is going to happen. What are you talking about? Yeah. I know that you mentioned something about loving people, but I want to know, like, what am I supposed to do? It's like Peter's distracted. All he can think about is like, hold on a second. My whole world is changing and I know you gave me one thing to do, but I'm kind of wanting to just know more about whatever it is. Verse 37, Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you, he says. So Jesus answers him, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. So this is a really sobering moment for Peter, right? And in this moment, Judas has just left, right? And here he is left with these 11 men, and he says to them, I'm going to go die. Your job is to stay in love. And Peter's like, wait, I will go anywhere. I will die for you. I will do anything you want. And Jesus is like, well, the one thing that you're supposed to do, to love one another, that's what you're going to have to do. But I know that you're going to try. You're going to try to follow me. You're going to try to do whatever it is that you think you need to do besides what I commanded you to do. And in the end, you're going to fall into disobedience. And so Peter was a guy who was so overconfident and so brash that he said, like, I'm going to charge ahead no matter what you say, Jesus. I'm going to charge ahead. And then at the end of the day, that overconfidence just leads to disobedience. He just becomes a guy who says, I'm going to do what I want. And eventually, we'll get to this part in the story, but he does deny Jesus 3 times before the rooster crows, before early in that next day, that next morning, he's already denied him. So the one thing that Jesus says to do, Peter skips over it, okay? And that's kind of our tendency. It's like Jesus said, this is the thing that you're going to be known for, that if you love one another, this is how all people will know that you're my disciples. And we go, okay, yeah, but what about all this other stuff? And Jesus is saying, no, let me die for the sins of mankind. Why don't you stay and love people in the way that only you can do? So the question for us today is, how do we live out this commandment? Because Jesus says this is a new commandment. This is a new commandment I'm giving to you. Now, this is not new in time, right? All throughout the Old Testament and the New, you've seen God command his people to love. It was new in experience. It was a new way of loving, which we'll see. So as Christians, we are supposed to be marked by love, that is the thing that we're supposed to be known for. So I want to talk about three ways from this passage that Jesus says that we're to be marked by love. The first way is that in our lives, love is not optional. Love is not optional. So we don't get to pick and choose who we're going to love. We have to love everyone. And if you're a follower of Christ, if you know Jesus as your Savior, you walk with Him, you love Him, you follow Him, then this is something that you're accountable to, that love is not optional. It's not something that you can just choose not to do. Jesus says a new commandment. This means that He's commanded us to love. So love is not optional. The second thing is love is sacrificial, okay? If you notice, the way Jesus says that He loves is sacrificial. Here's where He says it. A new commandment I give to you, verse 34, that you love one another just as I have loved you. If you think about this, Jesus has loved His disciples in a sacrificial way. He's washed their feet. He's served them. He's walked with them through life. And then ultimately, Jesus is going to go to the cross and die an ultimate death for you and for me. And He commands those who follow Him to love other people in that way, in a sacrificial way. In fact, here's another way that Jesus says it in John 15. He says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone would lay down his own life for his friends." And so this is the kind of love that we do. It's not optional. It happens. It's sacrificial. And then finally, love shows that we know Christ. Love shows that. It's the way that we are showing to the world that God is in us and that we are in Christ and that we follow Jesus with our life. If you don't live a life of love, then there's no way that you can claim to be a Christian. In fact, this is how John puts it in 1 John. This is a different letter that he wrote, same author. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love." Another way of saying it in another place in 1 John 2, "Whoever says he is in the light and hates his brother is still in darkness. Whoever loves his brother abides in the light." So all throughout the New Testament and especially in John's letters, you see this overwhelming emphasis on love for one another. So the question that I want to get to, that I think is really important for us to answer, is what does this look like in real life? I mean, because here's the thing, we love everything. We love our iPhones. We love pizza. We love our moms. We love everything. We use the exact same word for every single thing that we love. And so it's really just kind of so generic just to say, hey, love each other, right? Other languages, in the Greek, there's all these different words for love. In fact, in most languages, there's tons of word for every word. In English, I guess we simplified things and we said, we'll pick one for every 6 words, right? And we'll make that word mean everything. And that's kind of the way that we've approached it. But love means all of these different things. So here's what I want to do. There's actually a passage in 1 Corinthians that walks through a definition of love. And we're going to walk through that definition of love together. If you've ever been to a wedding, you've probably heard this passage, right? And if you've been to a lot of weddings, you may even be tired of this passage. You're like, did anybody say anything else besides this passage? But here's the thing. The funny thing is, 1 Corinthians 13 is not actually written to couples who are about to get married. It's not like the Apostle Paul said, okay, let's see. What do I need a good set of verses for when people do weddings. What do I say? Okay, here it is. Love is patient, love is kind. This will really sell. Like, wedding planners will be all over this. Like, this is the verse that you need to use for that wedding that you're going to do. It'll be perfect. No, that's not what Paul did. Paul actually was writing this letter to a church, and this church was really messed up. This church had people that fought with each other in the church. Can you imagine? Like, this has never happened since. Thank you. I appreciate that. People have always fought, right? And Paul's speaking into this environment where people are so angry at each other, and there's divisions, and they disagree. And there's all this immorality, and it's kind of worked its way into the church, and Paul's like, okay, I need you to understand what it means when Jesus says to love each other. I need you to understand what it means that if you've been born of God, if you know God, that you love each other. Here's what it means. And in just a few verses, he's going to lay out exactly what it looks like. And we're going to walk through this together. And here's what I would encourage you to do, okay? If love is not optional, right? And the kind of love that we have for one another is sacrificial, meaning that we have to, it like hurts a little bit. And love is the thing that demonstrates that we follow Christ. Then let's think about these verses in our own life. Like, I want you to personalize it. As we walk through this, I want you to think about yourself. And here's the thing, even if you're not a person of faith, even if you don't follow Christ, you might look at this list and think about if this is a definition of love. If it's a definition of love that maybe you could agree with at some levels, then how are you doing? How are you doing with your love for other people? Here's what he says, 1 Corinthians 13. He says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. So right there, it's like, I failed. I'm not a good lover. I mean, my wife would disagree, but love is, sorry, I'm just making sure that everybody's still awake. So love is patient, right? Like, I don't have time to be patient, you know? And so when I see something like this and I think, okay, if love is patient, what this means is that even if it doesn't happen fast enough, even if you or someone that you know doesn't deliver like they should, when they should, then I still love. Love is patient. It's kind. How many of us as followers of Christ are so mean to each other? I mean, just something so simple that you were taught in elementary school, be kind to one another, is something that as adults we have to learn because we don't grow out of that stuff. It's the weirdest thing. Like, I thought when I was a kid, I would look at adults and go, they probably don't get bogged down in all this pettiness. And then I became an adult and I realized, yeah, we do, right? We're just as petty. And so Paul says, look, be kind. Put the other person's needs above your own and realize that they have a situation that you may not understand. Okay? Be patient. Be kind. Don't envy. Listen, this is something that's really, really difficult. How many of you know someone who has a better job than you, that pays more than you have, or pays more than you make? Or maybe you know someone who came from a family that afforded them more opportunities than yours. Or maybe you know someone who has more or better or whatever. Well, it's not loving to look at that person and wish that you could have what they have. Because all that does is make them the object. It's like, okay, they have, and then you start to resent them, you start to hate them. And all you're saying is, I wish God blessed me the way that he blessed them, and because he hasn't, then I'm going to be unsatisfied. And again, we're all guilty of this, every single one of us. Boasting doesn't envy or boast. So love doesn't say, look at me. It doesn't draw attention to itself. So when you have love, the point isn't you, the point is the other person. So can you just imagine, just from these two lines so far, that if we actually, as followers of Christ, lived in this way, if this is the way that we approached our relationships, how different it would be. It's not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. So last night, Rachel and I were talking, and we were kind of complaining to each other about other people. I think what you call that is gossip in its real terms, but we were going to bed and we were like, it's one of those moments, have you ever been misunderstood? Okay, so we were misunderstood. We had this situation, and I won't go into the details because then you'll figure out who I'm talking about. It's no one in here. Trust me, I love all of you. I love everybody. But we had been misunderstood, so we were having this conversation about how much it stinks to be misunderstood, right? And so as we're going to bed, we're talking about this, and then I brought up something else that happened from someone else that I just had been misunderstood, and I was like very resentful to the point where, and this is something that I'll just tell you, this is what I do. If I get to the point where like I've been hurt, it's easy for me just to blow it off. And what I mean by that is I kind of just blow the person off. Like, oh, whatever. Like, I don't care what they think. Has anybody ever been there? And deep down inside, you're like, actually, I really do care what they think. And that's part of the problem. I care so much that I want to not care. And so you blow the person off. You just say, you know what? Whatever. And so my wife and I were trying to kind of finish up this conversation. And Rachel says, this is why, I've really tried. In all of 2014, she prayed for God to give her a love for people that were difficult to love. And I said, just without even thinking of it, I said, yeah, I'm actually preaching on that tomorrow. She goes, really? Like, really? So you're going to get up and preach about how important it is to love people sacrificially and without resentment. And here we are in the privacy of our home just talking about these two different situations where we're so angry and don't understand and we're misunderstood, and all we want is for these people to stop mistreating us. And it's like, it's easy just to blow that off and say, oh, yeah, this is all theory. Jesus just teaches this stuff and he says, love one another. And we say, yeah, we're supposed to love one another. And then a guy like me gets up and says, hey, everybody, love one another. And then meanwhile, we're all sitting here with our feet firmly planted in midair going, we don't know what it looks like because we've never seen it. But can you imagine? Can you imagine if we actually got this? And like, I get it wrong, and let me just tell you, the way we do it at the Current is when I get it wrong, I'm going to tell you. Like, that's just the way it is. And if some of you can't handle that, that's just kind of, let me just tell you about the culture. There's no one perfect here at CBC. There's no one perfect at the Current. We are all following Jesus. And so last night in that conversation with my wife, I failed. I failed to live up to the standard that God has called me to. And so I am standing here before you today saying love is hard. It's hard to do this, but God has called us to it. And he said that if you do this thing well, then this is the thing that people will point to and say, yes, Christians are loving. They're loving in such a way that I don't even understand because it doesn't make sense. It's not normal. It's not even natural, but there's something about it that because it doesn't make sense and because it just seems so out there that I'm drawn to it. That's the kind of love that Jesus is talking about. So it's not resentful. It's not irritable. He goes on, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing. So this is the idea that love doesn't look at someone who has been wronged or is doing wrong and rejoices at it or is glad about it. In fact, love grieves when people are in situations that are destructive for them. Love rejoices with the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. Love never ends. So basically, here's the thing. Love for the Christian, love for the follower of Christ is a love that is so powerful that it breaks through when people don't deserve it. That's the point. Every single one of these, you could say, wait a second, hold on. Love believes all things? What if I've been lied to? Love bears all things? What if I've put up with a lot to this point? Love endures all things? Like, I can't handle this anymore. Love never ends? What if the person, they just don't deserve it anymore? Every single one of these points to the fact that you can't do this, but Jesus can through you. That's the whole point. So you know what I had to do last night, just laying in my bed with my wife thinking about this stuff, like thinking about how could I just be so confused about this? Here's the thing. Jesus can. I can't. And that's the point. So when Jesus lives within you, when he empowers you, then you can love in the way that God has called us to love. But it doesn't happen because you force it. It doesn't happen because you just say, okay, I'm just going to try really hard. You'll do it for a while, but then you'll just exhaust and go back to the way that is more natural, and that is to harbor resentment and to hold grudges and all these different things. So here's the dream for the Current. It's that we'll be known by our love. That people who see us, even if they don't agree with what we teach, even if they look at us and they say, yeah, I don't get it, I don't buy into everything that they say or even any of it, but I will tell you, they love each other. And they love outsiders. What I mean by that is I came and I wasn't a part of it, but they loved me. And I just felt a part of it. That's our hope. That's our goal. That's what we want. So if you're here and you're observing, considering like, is this something that I could be a part of? Let me just tell you, we are not perfect. We are far from it. But we point people to a perfect God, a perfect Savior, Jesus Christ, who we believe changes us from the inside out. So that even when we fail, we can approach the one who has never failed and say, we fall short, but you don't. And so our faith, our hope is in you. Our trust is in you. And so as a community, we want to be loving, but we're not going to get there by just trying harder. We're going to get there by being more and more surrendered to Jesus Christ. And that goes for every one of us. Every one of us. Whether you've been a Christian for a long time or whether you have just now even considered what it would mean if you ever became a Christian, Jesus has to work through you. And then what could happen is if Jesus is working through you and he's working through me and we begin to do this thing, then we'll start to look like what Jesus intended, and that is a group of people who love one another well.